Hey everybody, and welcome to Unit 1, Lesson 5. And this lesson is going to be a little bit different. We're not going to talk about the Swift language, but we're going to talk about the tool that we're going to use to develop mobile apps for iOS. And we talked about Xcode before. We've used the playground, but now we're going to actually create an app or get you started to creating an app. So when you click Start Xcode, one of the options here is to create an Xcode project. So I will select that. And when you click, select the Xcode project, it will tell you what type of project that you want to create. Now you have different templates for different type of operating systems. The one that we're going to use is going to be for iOS. So I select iOS, and then I select an app, and then we click on Next, and then we give it a name. The name is important. So I'm going to say, we call it first app. And then you need to specify the team. I will discuss the team in a minute. The company, the organization name. The bundle identifier is quite important. The bundle identifier is the identifier that identify your app on the App Store. So when you publish your app, this is what identify your app on the App Store. In the interface that we're going to use, Apple has introduced Swift UI recently, and then before it used to be Storyboard. This book uses Storyboard, so we're going to stick to Storyboard. This one stays the same. The language that you want to use, either Objective-C or Swift. Obviously, we are learning Swift, so we will use Swift. This one you don't need to check. This is mainly if you want to store data locally. So I'm going to click on Next, the location where you're going to create this app, and then you click on Next, and that's it. Now let's take a look at this this project. So you can see it's not just a playground anymore. There's a lot more on this side. There are something in the middle, something on the side here, there's something on the top. So what we're going to do, I'm going to explain to you the different parts of this screen, of this IDE. So there is a class of important to us. This one is called the Swift View Controller. I will click on it for now, and then you'll see the content, the middle content changes as you select different things in this side. So this side is called the navigation panel or navigator area. So this include mainly your project, the content of your projects, different parts, the assets, and all the other things we will talk about in a minute. This is what we call the content area or editor area. This changes as you select different things from here. This is called here the inspector area. Again, it changes based on what you are working with. There is a debug area. When you run it, you have a debug area at the bottom. It's not showing right now, but it will show when we start running the application. Or you can actually click on view, and then there is debug area, show debug area. So it will show it at the bottom here, right? So that's called the debug and output area. This area here is called the toolbar area. So if you have toolbar, usually they appear in here on top. All right. So that's the different parts of Xcode IDE. Now let's take a look at one important file. There's a file here called first app. That is the name, the same name of your app that we created when we typed in the name of your app. In here, you have the name of your app, and this is that bundle identifier again. You can change that bundle identifier if you want, if you don't like what you have here. And so again, what this is a unique identifier that identify your app on the App Store. You have the versions and the build, so you can, every time you upgrade your app, you need to update those numbers. Then here you talk about the deployment target. What do you want? Where do you want this? Where do you want your app to run on? typically you can select the latest if you want to get the latest features, or you can select something that of an older, a different iOS version. The reason that you may want to do that, so you can have your application run on as many devices as possible. And then you can specify, do you want to run it, this used to be universal, if you wanted to run it on iPhone only, or iPhone and iPad, or you can run it on a Mac as well. The main interface is, because we're using a storyboard, this is the storyboard that we will be using. It's called main storyboard. So this is going to be my interface that I'm going to design and interact with. Do you want to allow portrait? Do you want to allow landscape, or landscape left and right, upside down? If you select any of these, you need to make sure that when you design your application, it actually runs and the UI are lined up based on your orientation that you do. The easiest way, if you do one device orientation, so your UI elements you don't have to worry too much about the UI elements, you still have to take care of it. Okay, so we leave that alone. The status bar, you just leave it as it is. The icon and things like that, we'll talk about it when we talk about the assets. So this is where you specify your icon that you want to be published when you publish your application. And then if you have a launch screen, we have something called here launch screen storyboard. Basically, it's like a splash screen that appears for a second or two, and then it disappears. The rest of this, you can add different frameworks as you progress in your project, in your skills in using Xcode. You can understand how we can use these more. The signing capabilities, it means what? It means that if you want to publish your application, you need to do what? You need to make sure that you are registered with Apple in order to publish your ID, your app. So to do that, you need a development account, either a team or an account. And how do we create development? How do we add? If you have already an Apple ID, you can just simply use that Apple ID, or not. You can create a new one, and then you can sign up for the developer account. But let's take a look at the preferences, and I'll show you a little bit about the preferences and how you can add this your account here. So in the Xcode, there is something called preferences. You click on it. One of the things that I do a lot is change the theme. The theme changed to basic, dark, night, there's dusk, and there is different one that you can select from the themes. You can change all of this, the font, the size of the font, and all of that stuff. The one that I was talking to you about is this one here. So this is your account. This is my account where I can sign my applications before I can publish it or test it. So you can add an account here if you want by clicking on this, an Apple ID, and then you're all set. Obviously, there's a verification process and all of that stuff. So you can change the settings. You can change the settings of Xcode by clicking on Xcode preferences, and you can change the fonts, add accounts, and other things. Okay. So that's it for the basics of Xcode. One more thing that I want to show you. I can show you if we go back here to the main screen, to this one, there are shortcuts that you can do with Apple, with Xcode. The most common one is Command B. Command B allow you to build your application and to check if there's any error. So the build is fine. Command R would allow you to run your application. Command dot will stop running your application. Those are the most common ones. There are command square bracket, left square brackets to shift the code to the left. Command right bracket, square bracket, it will shift the command to the right. Command O will show and hide navigators. Anyway, you will gain more experience as you do this. But the most common one that I use a lot is Command B. Command B to display or to build your application. So that's it. Short video, but it's important video. One more thing I forgot to mention is basically how the different files that you see here. So this one is a extension with an extension is Swift.Swift. This is a Swift file. It's a Swift program. This is another Swift class. This is another Swift class. This is the storyboard where we design our user interface and design our screens. We'll discuss later on this in more details. There's one called the asset file where you include things that are important to your projects, assets such as images, color schemes, Apple icons, different images for night and day. So you can do all of that in the asset folder. There is one more, the launch screen. We talked about that one. Is basically when you first start your application, like a splash screen. And the last thing here that we have is your info plist. An info plist is basically a bunch of properties that your application might require. Things, for example, permissions to use the camera, permissions to use the Bluetooth. All of that can be set here in the information plist. All right. Now this time I'm really done. Okay. So the next video, I'm going to show you how to run your application and debug your application. I'll see you in the next video.